The year is 2023. The place is a tasting room in central Vermont. It's quiet. Sunlight cuts through the big plate glass windows. It illuminates dust motes dancing in the air. A man named Julian stands behind a polished oak bar. He holds a single glass of cider up to the light. The liquid is the color of pale straw. It is perfectly clear. A customer, a food critic from Boston, swirls his own glass. He brings it to his nose. He closes his eyes. He says, "This is extraordinary. What apples are you using?" Julian smiles, a small, quiet smile. He reaches under the bar. He pulls out a laminated sheet, a technical specification sheet. It lists Brix levels, tannin structures, malic acid content. At the top of the page is a name, Eleanor Vance, Vance Orchard. Underneath that, in parentheses, it reads, Designated Cull Grade. The critic from Boston puts his glass down. He stares at the words on the page. Cull Grade. That's another name for seconds. For the stuff that doesn't make the grocery store shelf. The stuff that usually goes to livestock feed, or gets disked back into the ground. He looks at Julian. He looks at the golden cider in his glass. A liquid so complex it tastes like the soil itself. The room is silent for a long moment. The critic just shakes his head slowly. He says, "How?" Julian just keeps smiling that quiet smile. Because the answer to how is not about apples. It's about a woman who was told her life's work was second-rate, and what she did next. This is one of those stories, the kind you don't hear much anymore. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's about the quiet strength of knowing your own worth, when no one else does. We tell stories like this one every week. Stories about the people who build things to last. If you believe these stories matter, hit that subscribe button. Join us. Because you need to hear about Eleanor Vance. Her story starts long before 2023. It starts in the dirt of western Massachusetts. Dirt her great-grandfather bought in 1919. He came home from a war that was supposed to end all wars. He had two good hands, a strong back, and a few $100s saved. He bought 80 acres of rocky, unforgiving hillside. The neighbors said he was a fool. They said you can't farm rocks. He didn't listen. He spent 2 years clearing the stones by hand, him and 2 mules. He built the stone walls that still mark the property line today. Then he planted apple trees. Not the sweet, perfect-looking apples you see in stores now. He planted the old ones, Roxbury russets, Baldwins, Northern Spies, Newtown Pippins, apples with character. Apples with thick, tough skins and flesh that tasted of spice and wine. Apples that kept all winter in a cold cellar. He built a life from that rocky soil. His son took over in 1948. He kept the old varieties, but he added a few new ones. McIntosh, Cortland. He understood the market was changing. People wanted something a little sweeter, a little prettier. But he never tore out the old trees. He'd walk the rows with his own daughter, Eleanor. He'd hand her a lumpy, greenish-brown Roxbury russet, an apple so ugly you'd never see it in a store. He'd say, "Don't ever judge by the skin, Ellie. The real story is inside. That's where the flavor is. That's where the history is." Eleanor learned the orchard from him. She learned the feel of the soil, the smell of the blossoms in spring, the particular heft of a perfectly ripe apple in her hand. She went to college for agriculture, learned about soil science and integrated pest management. But her real education happened in those rows, with her father. He passed away in the winter of '98, her mother a few years before. The orchard was hers, all 80 acres, the old trees and the new, the stone walls her great-grandfather built. The responsibility felt heavier than any basket of apples. The world was different now. Farming was different. It was all about volume. and cosmetic perfection. The big grocery chains wanted apples that were identical, ruby red, flawless, uniform in size. Her apples weren't like that, especially the old ones. The russets were mottled and rough. The pippins were often lopsided. The Baldwins were prone to blemishes. But the flavor was deep, complex, unforgettable. Her father had always sold to a network of local farm stands and a regional co-op. The co-op was the big one. It supplied grocery stores all over New England. Getting a top-grade rating from the co-op meant you had made it. It meant a good price. It meant stability. Eleanor had never managed the co-op relationship herself. Her father always handled it. So in the fall of 1999, her first harvest alone, she did what he always did. She loaded up the flatbed truck with crates of her best-looking apples. She drove the 45 minutes to the co-op warehouse, a huge, cold, concrete building that smelled of cardboard and ripe fruit. The manager was a man named Frank Peterson. Frank was not a bad man. He was a good man, coached Little League, served on the town planning board, knew every farmer in 3 counties by name. He had known Eleanor since she was a girl. He shook her hand warmly, said he was sorry about her father. A real pillar of the community, he said. Then he got down to business. He walked around her truck. He picked up a Roxbury russet, turned it over in his hand. His face was kind, concerned. He looked at Eleanor. "Ellie," he said, "you know I have the utmost respect for your father, and for you, but I can't take these." Eleanor felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. "What do you mean?" Frank sighed. He set the apple back in the crate gently, like it was a fragile heirloom. "The market has changed, honey. Nobody wants these old-timers anymore. They want the Honeycrisps, the Galas, the pretty ones. These," he gestured to her beautiful, ugly apples, "these are seconds at best." The word hung in the air. Seconds. It wasn't an insult, not the way Frank said it. He said it with pity, with a sad, paternal kindness that was somehow worse than anger. He was trying to protect her, to save her from disappointment. Eleanor stood her ground. She said, "Frank, taste one. Just taste it. The flavor is better than any Honeycrisp." Frank shook his head slowly. "That's not how it works anymore, Ellie. People buy with their eyes. The chains have specs, size, color, pressure tests. These don't meet any of them. I can offer you cull price, $4 a bushel. Maybe the juice plant can use them." $4 a bushel. It wouldn't even cover the cost of picking them. It was a death sentence for the orchard. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. She said, "My father sold to you for 30 years. Frank's kind face tightened with something like regret. "And for 30 years I told him the same thing, that he needed to tear out these old trees, that he needed to modernize. He was a stubborn man, God rest his soul. I just don't want to see you make the same mistake. I'm trying to help you, Ellie. This is the most dangerous kind of limitation, the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are helping you. It cannot be fought with anger. It cannot be dismissed as cruelty. It can only be disproven. And that takes time. Decades sometimes. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend? By someone who thought they knew your limits better than you did? By someone who wanted to protect you from failure? It's a quiet kind of devastation. Tell me about it in the comments. Because what Eleanor did next is for anyone who has ever been told their best work was second rate. Eleanor didn't argue. She didn't plead. She looked Frank Peterson in the eye. She nodded once. She got back in her truck, and she drove home. The 45-minute drive felt like an eternity. Every word replayed in her mind. Seconds. Cull Price. I'm trying to help you. She pulled into the farm lane. The old trees stood silent in the autumn light, their branches heavy with the fruit that was supposedly worthless. She didn't go into the house. She walked out into the orchard, to the oldest row of Roxbury russets, the trees her great-grandfather planted. Their bark was gnarled and thick, like an old man's knuckles. She leaned her forehead against the rough bark of one of the trees. She closed her eyes. She could almost hear her father's voice. Don't ever judge by the skin, Ellie. The real story is inside. She stayed there for a long time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, a quiet decision formed in her mind. It wasn't a loud, defiant declaration. It was a cold, hard certainty. He was wrong. Frank Peterson was a good man, but he was wrong. His world was small. It was limited by grocery store specs and shipping logistics. Her world was this dirt, this history, this flavor. She went inside. She made a pot of coffee. She sat down at the old oak kitchen table, the same table her father and grandfather had used as their office. She pulled out the phone book. Yes, a phone book. This was 1999. She didn't have a computer. She had a rotary phone on the wall. She started looking for another kind of buyer. She didn't know what she was looking for at first. She just knew it wasn't another co-op. She looked under breweries, wineries, distilleries, and then she saw a small section, cideries. There weren't many back then. It wasn't the booming industry it is today. They were small operations, tucked away in the hills of Vermont and New Hampshire. She started calling. The first 4 numbers she dialed were disconnected. The 5th was answered by a gruff-sounding man who said he only used his own apples. The 6th call, a man answered with a friendly, upbeat voice. Green Mountain Cidery, Julian speaking. Eleanor took a breath. She told him her story. She didn't complain about Frank Peterson. She didn't sound desperate. She just stated the facts. I have 80 acres in western Massachusetts, a lot of old variety heirloom apples, Roxbury russets, Baldwins, Newtown pippins. The co-op says they're only good for juice. They say they're seconds. She waited. The line was silent for a moment. She thought he had hung up. Then she heard him exhale, a long, slow sound, like someone who had just found something they'd been searching for. He said, Seconds? You're telling me you have russets and pippins? Real ones? Yes, she said. He asked about the soil. She told him it was rocky, full of shale and granite. He asked about her methods. She told him she used minimal intervention. Let the trees do what they were meant to do. There was another pause. Then Julian said 2 words that changed everything. I'll be there tomorrow. Eleanor was stunned. Tomorrow? You don't even know where I am. He laughed, a warm, genuine sound. Ma'am, for apples like that, I'd drive to the moon. Just give me the address. He was in Vermont, a 6-hour drive, each way. She gave him the address. He said he'd be there by noon. She hung up the phone. The quiet kitchen felt different, charged with a new kind of energy. Hope. It was a fragile thing, but it was there. She spent the rest of the night cleaning, not the house, the barn. She swept the floors. She stacked the empty crates neatly. She wanted everything to be perfect. She was presenting her life's work to a stranger who might be her only chance. The next morning, she was up before dawn. She walked the rows. She picked a few of the best examples of each variety. She polished them on her sleeve. She arranged them on the old sorting table in the barn. a lumpy brown russet, a pale green lopsided pippin, a crimson Baldwin with a few dark spots on its skin. They looked like a collection of misfits, outcasts, seconds. To her, they were beautiful. At 11:45 a.m., a dusty green pickup truck with Vermont plates rolled up the farm lane. A man who looked to be in his late 20s got out. He had bright eyes and a friendly face. He walked right past Eleanor and into the barn. He stopped in front of the sorting table. He didn't say a word. He just looked at the apples. He picked up the russet. He held it to his nose and inhaled deeply. He closed his eyes. A slow smile spread across his face. He looked at Eleanor. He said, "Do you have any idea what you have here?" Eleanor shook her head. She thought she did, but the look on his face told her she had only scratched the surface. "This," he said, holding up the ugly brown apple. "This is gold. The supermarkets don't want it because the skin is tough, and it's not sweet enough for them. But for cider, this skin is full of tannins. That's structure, that's mouthfeel. The flesh has high acidity. That's brightness. That's what makes a cider crisp and clean, not flabby and sweet." He picked up the pippin. This one. The aromatics are insane. It smells like pineapple and fresh-cut grass. You can't get that from a Red Delicious. He went through every apple she had. He didn't talk about their flaws. He talked about their character, their complexity, their potential. He was speaking a different language, the language of a craftsman, not the language of a commodity broker. He finished his inspection. He turned to Eleanor. His eyes were shining. "I'll take them all." Eleanor couldn't believe what she was hearing. All of them? Even the ones with blemishes? He laughed. "Especially the ones with blemishes. A little scab, a little russeting. That tells me the apple had to fight to survive. It builds character. It concentrates the flavor. I don't want perfect apples. I want interesting apples. And these are the most interesting apples I've seen in years." They spent the next hour walking the orchard. Julian was like a kid in a candy store. He tasted apples right off the tree. He crumbled soil between his fingers. He talked about fermentation and yeast strains and barrel aging. Eleanor just listened. She was learning more about her own fruit in 1 hour than she had in a lifetime. Finally, they went back to the barn. Julian pulled out a checkbook. "How much do you want for the whole crop?" Eleanor hesitated. She thought of Frank Peterson's offer, $4 a bushel. It felt like a lifetime ago. She didn't know what to ask for. She had no frame of reference. She said, "What's a fair price?" Julian looked at her. He could have lowballed her. She would have taken it. She was desperate. He didn't. He said, "The co-op pays top dollar for premium Honeycrisp, about $28 a bushel. Your apples are more valuable to me than Honeycrisp. They have flavor you can't buy in a catalog. They have a story. I'll pay you $30 a bushel. For her seconds, for her culls, for her entire crop." Eleanor did the math in her head. It was more money than her father had ever made in a single year. She felt tears welling in her eyes. She fought them back. She just nodded. "Okay," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Okay." Julian wrote the check. It was for a staggering amount of money. He handed it to her. Then he reached out and shook her hand. His grip was firm, respectful. "This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, Ms. Vance." He arranged for a refrigerated truck to come the next day. He stayed and helped her crew with the harvest, working alongside them, laughing, sharing stories. When the last crate was loaded, he came to find her. He was standing by the old stone wall. He said, "You know, the neighbors must think you're crazy, selling your whole crop to some guy from Vermont." Eleanor looked out over her orchard, her trees, her dirt. She thought about her great-grandfather, her father. She thought about Frank Peterson's kind, pitying face. She said, "They told my great-grandfather he was a fool for planting on this hill. They told my father he was a fool for keeping the old trees. They told me these apples were worthless." She turned to Julian. "I'm starting to think being called a fool by certain people is a good sign." Julian smiled. He got in his dusty green truck, and he drove back to Vermont. Eleanor stood there holding the check. It wasn't just money. It was validation. It was proof. The dirt is enough. Her father's voice, clear as a bell. The dirt is enough. That winter was a good winter. For the first time, Eleanor wasn't worried about making it to the spring. She paid off all her bills. Cash. She bought a new-to-her John Deere tractor. Cash. She fixed the leaky roof on the old barn. Cash. She didn't owe anyone a dime. Self-sufficiency. It's the ultimate form of freedom. The news about her deal spread through the valley. Some farmers were skeptical. They'd see her at the feed store. They'd say, "You got lucky. That cider fad won't last. You should have taken the co-op deal." Frank Peterson saw her at the town meeting. He was polite, he nodded, but there was a distance in his eyes, a quiet judgment. He was the gatekeeper, and she had walked right around his gate. He couldn't understand it. In his world, the co-op was the only path to success. Her finding another way was a threat to that certainty. The spring of 2000 arrived. The apple trees burst into bloom. A sea of pink and white blossoms. Julian called her. "How are they looking?" he asked. "Like a promise," she said. He renewed the contract for the same price, $30 a bushel, for the entire crop. And so it began, a rhythm, a partnership, a quiet revolution on 80 acres of rocky soil. The year 2000, 3,000 bushels of heirloom apples, $30 a bushel, cash. The year 2001, a late frost hurt the yield, only 2,000 bushels. Julian didn't complain. He paid the same price. "Nature is the boss," he said. "We're just helpers." The year 2002. Green Mountain Cidery released a new single varietal cider, Vance Orchard Russet. It won a gold medal at a national competition. The description from the judges read, "A cider of stunning complexity with notes of leather, black tea, and beeswax. A testament to the power of terroir and exceptional fruit." Eleanor framed a copy of the review. She hung it in the barn, right next to the gold medal certificate Julian sent her. The year 2005. Eleanor bought the 20 acres of pasture that bordered her property to the north. The farmer was retiring. His kids didn't want it. She paid him his asking price, cash. She didn't plant more apples. She planted pears, old varieties, the kind used for making perry, a type of pear cider. Julian was ecstatic. The year 2008. The financial crisis hit. Farmers all over the valley were struggling. The co-op lowered its prices. Frank Peterson was forced to turn people away. Julian's truck still showed up in October. He handed Eleanor a check, $30 a bushel, same as always. Loyalty, he told her, is not a fair-weather commodity. The year 2012. Frank Peterson retired from the co-op. A younger man took his place, a man with an MBA and a belief in analytics. He drove out to Eleanor's farm one afternoon. He had a spreadsheet. He told her the co-op was looking to expand its heritage line. He said he could offer her a premium price for her russets and pippins. He said $22 a bushel. A very competitive offer, he called it. Eleanor listened politely. When he was done, she looked him in the eye. She said, I have a contract, but it's more than that. I have a partner, a man who saw value here when no one else did, a man who drove 6 hours on a hunch, a man who helped me bring in my first harvest. You're offering me a price. He offered me respect. I'm not for sale." The young man with the MBA didn't understand. He packed up his spreadsheet and left. He probably told his board she was an irrational sentimentalist. He couldn't have been more wrong. She was the most rational person in the valley. She understood the difference between price and value. It was a lesson he had never learned. The years kept stacking up, like cordwood for a long winter. 2015. Eleanor establishes a small nursery, grafting scions from her oldest trees onto new rootstock. She gives them away to young farmers just starting out, for free. She tells them, "Don't let anyone tell you what your work is worth." 2018. Julian's Cidery has grown. It's one of the most respected brands in the country. His ciders are on the menu at Michelin-starred restaurants. Every bottle of Vance Orchard Russet has a small story on the back label. A story about a woman who refused to believe her apples were seconds. One afternoon in late September of that year, a familiar car pulls up to her lane, an old Buick. She recognizes it immediately. It's Frank Peterson. He looks older, thinner. His shoulders are stooped. He gets out of the car slowly. He walks over to where she's standing by the barn. He doesn't look at her. He looks at the rows of old, gnarled trees. He's holding a bottle in his hand, a bottle of Vance Orchard Russet cider. He says, "My son brought this back from the city. He paid $25 for it, in a fancy restaurant. He said it was the best thing he'd ever tasted." Eleanor doesn't say anything. She just waits. Frank finally turns to look at her. There are tears in his eyes. "I was wrong, Ellie." He says it so quietly she can barely hear it. "I was so sure I was right. I was so sure I was helping you. I thought I was protecting you from a mistake your father made. But he wasn't the fool. I was." This is the moment, the reckoning, the quiet triumph. Eleanor could have said 1,000 things. She could have reminded him of his words, seconds, cull price. She could have gloated. She could have enjoyed his shame. She didn't. She was not built that way. She looked at this old man, this man who had, in his own way, shaped her life. His certainty had forced her to find her own. His closed door had forced her to build her own gate. She just nodded. She said, "You did what you thought was right, Frank. That's all any of us can do." Then she did something remarkable. She said, "Would you like a tour? I've put in some new pear trees you might like to see." And for the next hour, she walked her old adversary through her orchard. She showed him her success, not as a weapon, but as a lesson, a quiet, gentle lesson in the difference between perception and reality. When he left, he shook her hand. He said, "Your father would be so proud." Eleanor watched him drive away. She knew he was right. Her father would be proud, not because of the money, not because she had proven someone wrong, but because she had never, not for 1 second, forgotten the most important lesson. The real story is inside. It's 2024 now. Eleanor Vance is in her 70s. She still works the farm. She walks the rows every morning. Her hands are gnarled now, like the bark of her oldest trees. The partnership with Julian is in its 25th year. His son is learning the business now. He comes down to the farm with his father. He listens to Eleanor tell stories about the trees. He is learning that cider is not just fermented juice. It is agriculture. It is history. It is a relationship between a person and a piece of land. The legacy is more than just a successful farm. It's a change in thinking. Other small orchards in the valley, ones that were struggling, have started selling to other craft cideries. They're planting the old varieties again. They call them cider apples now, not seconds. Words matter. Labels matter. The co-op even has a heritage cider program. They pay a premium for the ugly apples they once called culls. They had to. The market demanded it. A market Eleanor and Julian helped to build. 1 6-hour drive at a time. Inside Eleanor's kitchen, on the wall above the old oak table, hangs a simple frame. It doesn't hold a gold medal or a glowing review. It holds the carbon copy of a check. The first check Julian ever wrote her. The paper is faded. The ink is a little blurred, but the message is as clear as it was in 1999. It's a physical artifact, a testament to a moment when one person's belief outweighed a whole system's doubt. It's a reminder that the most valuable things are often overlooked, dismissed, graded as second best. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being told their work isn't good enough. Someone is being told to change, to conform, to be more like everyone else. Someone is being offered the cull price for their soul. Maybe that someone is you. Eleanor's story is a quiet answer to that loud doubt. It says, trust the story inside. It says, find the person who speaks your language. It says, your perceived flaws might just be your greatest strengths. It's a long and lonely fight, proving your worth to people who think they know better, especially when they are kind. But the dirt is enough. Your dirt, whatever it may be, it is enough. If this story meant something to you, there are others like it here. Subscribe and don't miss a single one. And in the comments below, tell me about a time you found value where no one else saw it. Share this story with one person you know who needs to hear that their work matters, that they are not seconds, they are gold, just waiting for the right person to see them shine.